Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules, and at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome back to another edition of BOA The Revival. Very excited about tonight's program. We're going to be going back to Yuba. We're going to be covering the Yuba County 5 case with author Tony Wright, and I'm kind of just blown away here. I'm absolutely amazed by this book. People can't see it, but I'm holding it up here for Tony to see. I just devoured this book over the weekend before this conversation, and I absolutely love it. And it was a tour de force as the introduction. I don't have her name right in front of you, but as the woman behind the Mopac Yuba 5 podcast, She wrote the introduction.
Shannon McGarvey.
She called it Shannon McGarvey. There you go. As Shannon McGarvey said in the intro, this is like the Yuba County 5 Bible, folks. This is the most in-depth investigation of the Yuba County 5 case that's been put to paper. This is the book. This is the one that everybody who has been waiting for a Yuba County 5 book for all these years. This is the one. This is the Yuba County 5 book. And that's with all due respect to our mutual friend, Drew Beeson. He even said it when he interviewed you after the book came out. He said the same thing. This is the Bible. This is the book. So I wouldn't call them fans, but for people interested in the Yuba County 5 case, you got to get this book. This is the one you've been waiting for. So with all that said, Tony's only got an hour or so here with us tonight, so we're gonna try and squeeze as much on him up as we can. So I'm going to stop yapping and welcome him to the show. So Tony Wright, thank you so much for being on Binnall of America, and thank you so much for writing this book, man. As I said last night in my message, tip of the cap, sir. This is a tour de force.
Yeah, thank you very much. And, hearing from Shannon and Drew saying that things aren't right, the disappearance of the Yuba County 5 is going to be the Yuba County 5 Bible. That's awesome hearing that from them, because for 4 years, those are probably the top two people I leaned on outside of the families and investigators to talk about the case and get leads on people to interview and, look for articles and just unearth anything we possibly can on this case and just get it out there to the people. And, this book is the deep dive. So if you're ready to, roll up your sleeves and get into a case that's been described as bizarre as hell, you're in for a treat, because this book, I wanted it as thorough as possible, just get everything in there. So people who want to know more about the case, they've got everything in their book or on their Kindle or however you want to do it. Yeah. So I'm happy to deliver.
It's fantastic. Now, as is sort of tradition on the show here, when we start out, the bio, the background, who is Tony Wright, and what led you to writing the book, Things Aren't Right, The Disappearance of the Yuba County 5? What led to the book?
So I'm an archivist, so I work in an archive and records management facility, and sometimes I'm just entering data and scanning historical photographs and doing stuff like that. And I just put on some true crime, videos from YouTube, and it was around 2018 when I started getting into a lot of these creator videos from YouTube, like Criminally Listed, Bedtime Stories, Nexpo. So I'm watching them, and Criminally Listed has their 100th episode, and it's a show where they have a topic every week, like murders with strange written clues left behind, or crimes that unsolved murders in Texas, or something like that. But their 100th episode was the viewer's choice. And the only one I remember was a case called Gary Mathias and the Boys. And as soon as I heard that case, I'm like, wow, what is this? This is like really fascinating. It's strange. It's creepy. It's really heartbreaking. Have I heard this story before? No, I haven't, because I'm like, student of the old school, like Unsolved Mysteries, and the show that Leonard Nimoy used to host back in the day.
In Search of.
Yeah. Stuff like that. And remember all those Time Life books about the weird?
Oh, yeah. Bermuda Triangle, Amelia Earhart, D.B. Cooper, the classics.
Yeah, so I'm totally into that kind of stuff. And this case really caught my attention. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to read a book. Maybe if it's at the library, maybe it's at Amazon. There's nothing out there. So
yeah.
I did some comic book writing between 2014 and probably till last year. So I was with a company and they were putting out some books like horror novels. And I just asked the guy in charge of the novels, I said, would you do a true crime book? Is that cool? And he goes, yeah, what's the case? Tell me more about it. And this guy just listened to my spiel about what would be the Yuba County 5 case. And he said, no one's written a book about this before? And I said, no, not to my knowledge. He said, go for it. I mean, the case is over so many years old. He said, is it older than 30 years? Because you're going to have like a little bit of a historical edge to it. And there's going to be interest. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's really blown up on the internet because between 2018 and 2019, all podcasts and YouTube creator. It came out of it seriously came out of nowhere. And so I can't get away from this story. So I just sat down and said, I'm just going to write the book on it.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, it's 2019. I'm finishing up on a comic book I'm writing. And 2020 seems like the year for me just to get out there and do things. And the guy I was talking to for the book, his name's David Hayes. And we traveled to Chicago together for C2E2, which is like one of the biggest comic book conventions. And we're driving there and we're talking about what we're doing. I'm like, I am going to work on that book. And that whole year went crazy. But I was able to work from home and make a lot of contacts, do a lot of interviews with people. And I just started looking for people involved in the case, newspaper articles. And then a year later, I flew out to California for my first trip to investigate the case. So I did all the research at the Yuba County Sheriff's Department. They took me up to the Plumas National Forest, started building relationships with families. And it was around that time I was introduced to Drew because one of the family members said, someone else is writing the book. And I'm like, all right, you know what? You can have 2 Yuba County 5 books.
Yeah.
And they introduced me to Shannon McGarvey because when I first started researching the case and talking to people, there was talk of a documentary. And the documentary became the podcast, which is now the Mopac Audio Yuba podcast. So I met Shannon McGarvey through the podcast, I Drew Beeson through his book, and met some other people who were researching the case. And as time goes on, some other people reached out to me because they knew what I did on the podcast, and guys like Anthony Dunn, who lives in England, who's been doing a lot of work on the case. Eduardo Coelha in Argentina, he's trying to do a book on the case in Spanish. So people are reaching out to me, and finally got the book out. And while I was getting the book together, I just got in touch with Genius Book Publishing, and they're based out of Milwaukee. They do true crime books, and they love stories that are not, wrapped up in a perfect little bow. It's not going to be an episode of Dateline where you start with a murder and then you end with like a acquittal or a conviction.
Yeah.
Genius is like, hey, you got a book like that? We want it. And I mean, Go ahead. They're willing to work with me. I'm willing to work with them. Let's get the book out there. And, we're able to get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, definitely through the site itself, Genius Book Publishing. We're actually getting into libraries and things like that. So we're getting the book out to the masses, and so far so good. It's been very positive as far as what people had to say, yourself included. Really appreciate the feedback. And I know a lot of people out there are big into the Yuba County 5 case. Yeah.
Well, I've been privileged to kind of become friends with Drew over the last year or so, and he's kind of shepherded me in a little bit here to the community. It's a welcoming but tight knit community of folks who are kind of looking at this on a real serious basis. I'm trying to grappling with how best to handle this because I'm really familiar with the case. You're obviously really familiar. I presume the Binnall of America listeners are familiar with the case.
Sure.
Do you want to do like a 5-minute like thumbnail or whatever of sort of what's your elevator pitch kind of thing on the case rather than us go chronologically through the events? Because,
sure.
I want to make the most of my time here with you, and I got some real nuggets of stuff that in the book that I want to get into. So we don't want to. And if folks want more of the in-depth on the story, go listen to the Drew one tonight. That's like 101. Tonight is the 102 episode. Tonight we're going to get real advanced shit. So
heck yeah.
So go ahead and give us like the 5-minute elevator pitch, the story of the Yuba County Five for the folks who just picked up this episode and are going to bring them up to speed.
Yeah, the 5 men are Ted Weir, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. So all 5 of those guys lived in the Yuba County area of Northern California. So they're basically in Marysville, California, and the surrounding communities. That's north of Sacramento. And on the night of February 24th, 1978, all 5 of those guys jumped into a 1969 Mercury Montego, and they drove from Marysville to north to Chico, California. They went to Chico State University to watch a basketball game. Their favorite team, UC Davis, had an away game that night at Chico State, and it's towards the end of the regular season for college basketball. And as big UC Davis fans, UC Davis was probably going to win the division, probably go on to the playoffs afterwards. They were a Division II team, so they didn't really have the March Madness thing, but they're cheering their favorite team on. But what's more important, the next day, all 5 of those guys were going to play in the Special Olympics basketball tournament near Sacramento. So 4 of the men had intellectual disabilities. Gary Mathias was schizophrenic. So they go to the game, they watch their team win. Afterwards, they go to a convenience store in Chico to get like pop and candy bars, some milk, some chips, usual late night sort of victory snack. And then after that, they completely vanish off the face of the earth. Their parents are worried sick. They're up all night. The next day, they can't find them anywhere. And 4 days later, the car they were driving in is found 75 miles in the wrong direction from home in the Plumas National Forest on a snow-covered, deserted road that's like 4,500 feet in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So this is the wrong location. These guys should not be where they were. That car shouldn't have been there. Jack Madruga was the driver of the Montego. He was a very reliable, very trustworthy driver. And this is just baffling to everyone. So the Yuba County Sheriff's Office, where 4 of the 5 guys lived, worked with the Butte County Sheriff's Department, where the car was abandoned, and that's also Chico, California, where the game was, started working together with another department, which was Yuba County, Sutter County, which is home of Yuba City, because that's where Bill Sterling lived. And they started an investigation, like searching the forest, getting information from family and friends, like where are these guys? Why were they up there? And no one could figure it out. Like, this doesn't make any sense. All 5 of them were part of a community organization called the Gateway Projects. It was the team that they played for in the Special Olympics. And Gateway would do things like have educational classes for people with, disabilities or mental illness, being like life coaches. So people could live independently, have some more independence in life. And then also they gave people jobs. So they would either like build sort of like steps for like mobile homes, or they would do work with PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric, which is a huge utility out in California. So they would either wind cable or just do sort of like menial tasks. Nothing huge, but they would do these jobs, and that's what the guys did. And so to disappear before a basketball game of great importance to them, because if they won that game in near Sacramento, a few months later, they would go down to UCLA and be in the big statewide Special Olympics tournament. They get to go to Disneyland. So it was a big event. So these guys disappear February 24th, 1978. The car is found February 28th, 1978. By June, early June, around the 4th or 6th of 1978, Ted Weir's found about 12 miles away from the car in a Forest Service trailer. Someone had broken into the trailer. Ted was found under like 8 sheets. He had lost 80 to 100 pounds. There were some sea ration cans in there. Someone had gotten into him. Someone was eating. The shoes of Gary Mathias were in the trailer, but he was nowhere to be found. And after they find Ted Weir, they find Jack Madruga's remains, Bill Sterling's remains, Jackie Hewitt's remains, and Gary Mathias has never been found. So over the month of June, 4 of the 5 are found, and now there's more questions because they're found 12 miles northeast of the car. If you follow sort of these mountainous roads that sort of wind through the Plumas, and if you cross the land, it's 5 miles. But if you cross the land, it's super treacherous. I mean, it's really rough terrain. Right. And I mean, it goes from like 5,000 to 4,000 to 3,000 feet. It's rugged. It was snowy up there. You're just not getting through that. And also what's amazing is when these 5 guys left Marysville, California, it's probably mid-high 60s. The low that night's probably going to be like 45, 50 degrees. When they get to the Plumas, there's a ton of snow and it's below freezing. So they're wearing like tennis shoes and jeans and slacks and, light coats. They weren't going up there for any reason. So them being up there, their deaths, it's a lot of questions. I call it a journey into madness. And people will say, well, they had disabilities and, one guy had mental illness and he's responsible for it. But everything leading up to this doesn't add up because Gary, who did have schizophrenia, did have his life on track. He was on a regimen of medication. He'd been doing well. His stepfather and his mom kind of took him under their wing to get him, taken care of. And the other guys, they could travel to Sacramento. They did it the day before on Thursday, the 23rd for a basketball practice. They had no history of ever getting lost. And the families knew that these guys were super responsible. They'd call and say, hey, we're running late, or hey, we stopped somewhere to get something to eat. We'll see you at this time.
Right.
And if you take that trip to go up to the Plumas to go to the spot where they abandoned their car, it's way different than driving from Marysville to Chico. It's pretty flat, that area. And now you're up in the mountains. Something's not right. And that's and that's why the titles things aren't right, because this whole trip, the investigation, just a lot of strange things that were going on at the time. A lot of this isn't adding up, and things are just really off. Yeah.
The more you dig into it, the more unanswered questions there are. It's like a series of really unfathomable twists.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you're like, wait a minute, what? Now what? So it's really, I think that's what really captures people's imagination. And like you say, the Occam's razor a lot of people use, they dismiss these guys because they had intellectual disabilities, when anyone who's taken 5 minutes to look at this case understands that these guys were fully functioning adults. I mean, they had jobs, they had love interests. They all graduated from high school or got their degrees from high school. Some went to college, some were in the Army. Yeah. It's like this idea that they were incompetent and unable to drive to Sacramento and back, or drive to the basketball game and back, is ridiculous. And the idea that they got lost, folks, the difference between getting lost and getting stranded in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
True. I've gotten lost before. Everyone's gotten lost. But you don't just wind up there's a reason why you wind up in the middle of nowhere and then get out of the car and then go further off into the middle of nowhere, completely unprepared for what you're venturing out to.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling Drew. Like, what makes you exit a car to go out into the snow and below freezing temperatures? I mean, when they found the car, they were able to hotwire it. and there was about a quarter of a tank of gas. They did get the car stuck on a snowy road, middle of nowhere in the Plumas, but all they had to do was just, push the car out.
Yeah.
I'm a Midwesterner, so I'm used to snow and your car getting stuck in the snow and pushing other people out. I mean, so it's a way of life. Mm-hmm. I don't know how familiar they would be with pushing a car out of the snow, but still, I mean, if they got stuck in the car, it's a bit, of a situation.
Well,
it's a situation where it's like, okay, do we wait it out? Do we?
Right. That's kind of what you were painting something in my head just then, because it's like this case is often compared to Dyatlov Pass,
right?
In the sense that both groups of people, and we kept hammering this point when I talked to Drew in October. Both groups of people were there was an unknown compelling force that was something drove them to flee from their confines, either the tent in Russia or the car in Yuba County, something, because if someone was like, we got to go get help. Okay. I didn't know these guys. We don't know. I mean, maybe the family would agree with me in this sense. I can't imagine all five would leave to go. Like, I would think like maybe two of them would go, hey, we're going to go and look for help. Stay here. Like, I don't see why all five would go and look for help. So the idea of that kind of thing, like something made all five of them get the hell out of there for some reason. Yeah,
and if you drive up that way, it's an area in the Plumas past or near a place called Rogers Cow Camp. Once you go up there, it's like, oh, this is kind of no man's land. Like it's like a point of no return.
Yeah.
And if you drive up that way, you'll pass places. You could stop at someone's house, and I mean, there are homes up there, and there was a fire station up there. There was a place called Mountain House, which was sort of like a gathering place / lodge / bar / whatever.
Yeah.
But here they are in the middle of nowhere. Here's the interesting part. While their car is abandoned on that road, there's another car on the road. And that same road, a guy by the name of Joseph Shones had been stuck up there for anywhere between 4 to 6 hours. His VW Beetle gets stuck up there. He tries to get out, push the car out of the snow, has a heart attack, gets back in the car. In meeting Drew, I don't know if I would have ever found this immediately or stumbled across it. One of the things Drew told me early on is, you know what kind of car he was in? I'm like, yeah, VW Beetle. My dad had one back in the day, in the Midwest. He's like, that's not a mountain car, is it? I'm like, no. He's like, were you ever in it in the winter? I'm like, yeah, I was a little kid. I don't really remember. He says, that's an air-cooled engine. He's like, that car needs to be in motion for the heat to work properly. So if he's running that car like he says he is to stay warm, how's he staying warm? And we have a lot of questions about Shones because he sees the guys and he says
he's the compelling, bizarre sixth character in the book. In the story. He's the wild card that gets thrown into. It's like if he hadn't exist in the story, it would still be wildly bizarre and strange.
Right.
But he adds in all kinds of extra spices of strangeness to the story. Where I can't wrap my mind around this guy because as you were telling his account of what happened, it was like I want to interrupt you and almost just go, so the story goes, because this is his account of what he experienced up there. And as we find out more about him, he's pretty much a fairly unsavory character.
He's an unusual dude. I mean, so Shones is up there. He lives in Berry Creek, which is probably like a 15-20 minute drive south of where he was. So he did stop at the place called Mountain House to have a few beers. And the lady that was serving him beers watched him drive north instead of south.
Yeah.
When she saw him driving north, she's like, why is he going that way? I mean, that's middle of nowhere. He's going to get his car stuck. Like, that. What is he doing? So that was probably like 6 p.m. on the 24th. And he gets stuck. He tries pushing his car out, has a heart attack, claims around 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. the guys pull up the road, but there's a pickup truck behind him. Now, if you follow all the stories he gives to the press, so he talks to more than one newspaper, he'll say, the car pulled up, there was a pickup truck behind it. How many occupants in the pickup truck kind of flip-flops, and you take plus or minus so many people. But basically there was a guy and a woman with a baby. And then there was this, incident where he could see them a distance away, but then they walked up towards his car because he heard all these whistling noises. And then there was like, all this stuff was happening. And it's like, he claims like because he got out of according to Shones, he got out of his car. He started asking for help because he's like, help, I'm having a heart attack. And they all ignored him and ran into the woods. Like, who does that?
Yeah. So, his story has a lot of details, but the details are incredibly vague. So hard to, they're like, wait a minute, what? You think you saw a pickup truck? You don't know exactly how many people were there. You're not sure what they were doing. It's like, it's really maddening.
And then he walks from the car to Mountain House. So that took him, with his heart attack, he said, oh God. So he's up there till like midnight, and then he's there till about 3, 4 a.m. and he starts walking to Mountain House. He gets there at 8 a.m. So this guy's been up in the Plumas in the freezing cold weather for probably 12, 13 hours, no hypothermia.
No ill effects from that,
And
besides the alleged heart attack.
He walks in and asks for aspirin and a glass of water. I mean, if you're having a heart attack, the first thing out of your mouth is like, hey, I need some aspirin and a water. And people are like, wait, what's that, man? And he basically says, oh, I should have done this 2 years ago.
Thank you. That's one of the big ones in the notes, because we kind of left on the last episode where we talked with Drew about this. That was sort of like this big cliffhanger where Drew so Tony Wright's coming out with a book, and he has uncovered this thing that Shones said that 2 witnesses at the bar the next morning heard Shones say, which is, I should have done this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you have any theory on what that might mean? I thought you made an interesting point in the book, really interesting point, in that, and again, folks, this is the super detailed stuff. The person who found Shones' car up there, or someone who was helping to move Shones' car with the wife, or someone who was around Shones' car the following day, noticed a lot of feces, a lot of animal feces. Look, I think they said it looked like a lot of dog poop, which you can speculate. Maybe if he's totally innocent in the Yuba County case itself, maybe he was like doing something nefarious with a dog, like releasing it out into the wild, or like getting rid of a neighbor's dog that he didn't like. I said, he's an unsavory character, folks. This is totally within the realm of possibility. But you put that out there as an interesting idea of like, what could this guy, could he mean by I should have done this 2 years ago?
See, that's what we're trying to figure out, because, so the day before, the 24th, when he's at Mountain House and he's drinking beer there, he's talking to the lady who's serving him about dogs and dogs who bite people. And then he takes off, and then he comes in the next day, pretty worse for wear, but he doesn't say, hey, I had a heart attack, get me to a hospital.
Right.
He's just like, I should have done this 2 years ago. So what should he done 2 years ago? Like, get his heart checked, get rid of this dog, like get his life on track for better health. Could have been something related to because he doesn't even mention like, oh, hey, there are these whole bunch of people showed up too, and they disappear into the woods, and this is really creepy.
Well, he saw the other car when he left, so he didn't mention, oh, hey, there's another car up there with my car.
He walks right by it.
Yeah.
And with the press, he'll say, I looked in the car, I got in the car. There were baby clothes in the car, which there weren't. The car reminded him of a child, which I don't know how, because when law enforcement looks in the car, they see the stuff from Bears Market, which is the place they went to after the game. And there's like a newspaper and like a book from a program from the basketball game. And one of the maps are out, but it's like, Shones, were you in the car or not, buddy? And, his stories aren't straight. But yeah, I mean, he's this guy who sees him. And then that's just a huge question mark right there. And then you've got
maddening in a sense. It's maddening in a sense because as you say throughout the book, like you had access to these police files, so you looked at this thing from a perspective that almost nobody has had a chance to, except for a few folks in the research community. It's maddening in a sense because, like, I don't know, we're looking at it now, and it feels like the police kind of were thinking the same thing, but it doesn't feel like they really pressed this Shones character hard enough or far enough really to get into it. Because, like, you and I have a million questions for this guy.
Because
why did not the authorities also? And you mentioned in the book, I think it's come out in general that, like, they would try to interview him, and he was like, "Oh, my heart, I can't take any more talk about this horrible night." And then later, the cops want to give him a polygraph test, and I don't know if it was the lawyers or the lawyers in general got involved. They're like, "Well, if he dies from a heart attack, then we're Yuba County sheriffs will get sued." And it's like, oh, come on, dude. Like,
they were afraid of that.
I don't know if this guy even had a heart attack, but it is really maddening that they didn't press down on this Shones guy, because I feel like he has to be connected somehow to this.
Yeah, it's to rule him out, you really got to clear him 100%. And what you see, so the first interview, he tells him, this is what happened. But then the second interview, he kind of expands upon that a little bit. And the second officer that interviews him notices that when he's talking about himself, when he's talking about his heart attack, he's very animated. He's really into the story. It's all about him. But when this officer's like, okay, I got some questions about the case, he's getting annoyed. He's kind of vague. He's acting a little aloof at times. And there's a part in that second interview when this officer's like, hey, come on, answer some more questions for me about these guys. Shones is in the hospital for his heart attack during this interview. And he just lays back on the bed with like his hands behind his head. And he's like, man, I think you guys think I had something with these dudes disappearing or something like that. Yeah. And the officer's like, well, you give us something. Yeah, were you? And after that, I mean, Shones does have a time where he does meet with the family. We do have a tape of that meeting, but the audio quality's deteriorated over time. We can pick up on some things, and he denies that he was drinking. He makes it sound like the guys just kind of ran into the woods, and the family members are there, and they're kind of like, okay, your story's not making any sense to us.
Yeah.
And they're trying to press him, and he's kind of like, yeah, I'm just kind of here answering questions.
Right.
So that meeting goes nowhere. And that's the whole thing with Shones, is that it just all went nowhere. They never followed up on him.
Right. That's the thing. You'd think the cops would say, they're like, oh, he can't do this because he's suffering. Why not bring him in a year later? Why not why not contact him a couple of years later and be like, hey, man, we just got a few more follow-up questions. We're still looking into this, and, see if he trips up or see if he says something else or whatever. But it's like they just seem to cut him loose. And it's like, no, this guy is the linchpin to this case.
Yeah.
It's kind of maddening. It is very maddening because I feel like he is such a critical part of this thing. I mean, it's bizarre that he puts himself. Well, he somehow got stuck in the situation. So it's like if he was trying to do something nefarious to these dudes, he slipped up because he also got stuck, and then it was like, why didn't what I have to come up with a whole story about what I was doing up there. So it's supremely weird.
And another thing is, you're talking about the sheriff's department, like, why didn't they wait another year? Well, the guy who was sheriff at the time the guys went missing, he gets elected out of office. And then he has an undersheriff, and he's gone too. So I think you got like this changing of the guard with the Yuba County Sheriff's Department. So I kind of wonder if that whole
got lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Yeah, but I also think like within the department there were some guys who were probably of the opinion, they got lost. We put a lot of time and money into this already. It is what it is.
I got you. Yeah.
What are you going to do? But I'm sure that there were other people within the department who were interviewing or investigating the case who probably thought like, I don't know, man, there's probably more to this than we know. And not only was the Yuba County Sheriff's Department like the main group, but they had like Butte County helping them. They had Sutter County helping them. and eventually they have Plumas County helping them, because Plumas County is where they found the trailer with Ted Weir in it.
Yeah.
And so that's like right over the county line where they find the trailer and Ted Weir in it. And then the other three, when they had perished, they were probably like a mile or so away from probably like 1 to 3 miles from the trailer.
Right.
So, and it's still in Plumas County, and you have to kind of wonder to yourself, like, what did these other departments know? What records do they keep? Because Yuba's the one that only has the records. And I kind of like checked with Plumas County. I checked with Butte County. Even they brought in the state of California, like their investigators and their records. They're not sharing or talking or saying that they have anything. It's like, I mean, if Yuba County's willing to share and you guys aren't, I mean, what do you have and what do you know? And,
yeah, they might have some good nuggets in there that we like the Shones quotes from the Mountain House. Those came out of the police files, right? So it's like,
yes, absolutely,
that's new information. Now, this is a completely arcane thing that I've been hooked on, and I pitched this to Drew last night, and he was like, "That's interesting, but I don't know. I have no idea." So have you given any thought to the watches? Because the watches, to me, they just something's not right. It says that things aren't right with the watches. To catch people up, Ted is found in the trailer with his personal possessions next to him and a watch of unknown origin.
Right.
No one knows whose watch this is. When they find Jack Madruga, he is found grasping a watch.
Mm-hmm. What
is this? I feel like there's got to be some significance here with watches that I don't know.
Yep.
But have you
good question.
Any thought to that? Did you ever did that ever click to you at all? But like, that's weird that he's holding a watch and there's a watch there.
I know when I talked to Shannon McGarvey and Drew, they said that Madruga was probably holding his watch because he was in the military, and they probably there's a way you can use your watch to find your way or something like that.
So for like navigational purposes, maybe.
Yeah. And then what I'm thinking, either one of the other guys had a watch and no one knows who it is, but it was that there before the guys got into the trailer. From what I learned, it was a relatively new trailer. The Forestry Service uses it. Some of the guys who would probably be working up there or doing stuff.
Yeah, somebody could have left it behind. Yeah, I totally can see that this could be completely red herring. A lot of these cases have these where it's like, well, what about the
but it's a good question, though.
Shoes? But but to me, it's like something's weird there.
But if he's got a watch and there's a watch near Ted, did it come from someone or somewhere else? And was there another person up in the trailer with him? Yeah. Because you kind of have to think about all these things, especially how they got from the car to the trailer, because it's not a straight shot. It's a really crazy winding path. And I couldn't get to the trailer because when I was up there 2021, it was right after the forest fires. They had a couple years worth of that where trees were down and the roads were blocked. It was a huge mess. But seeing those roads, it's like, how the heck do you find that road?
Yeah.
How do you navigate it? How long are you out in the wilderness? Like I said, I'm from the Midwest, and a few weeks ago, I'm talking to Drew, and it's -6 outside, and I gotta like get the mail or something, or take my dog out. It's like, man, this is not my day, and but I'm out. Weather here is probably like low 30s, but still, you go outside, it's like, oh man, sometimes. But these guys who are not used to the snow, not used to the cold. I mean, you're walking through snow in tennis shoes. That's never a good idea.
Yeah.
And we got that slushy snow right now, and you walk through that, you step that wrong.
Wet feet. Yeah.
Oh, that's the worst. So that's what these guys are dealing with. So they're walking like 5 miles like that. I mean, hypothermia is kicked in very quickly. And are you eating? And then we talked about Ted Weir, who got to the trailer. And they said he probably was in there for what? Probably 4 to 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. I mean, he's got to be getting water somehow. Are they melting snow? Is he eating snow? Was there anything up there that he could drink? Because you're not going to have, like, you can't turn on a faucet and you got water, because it's much different within those trailers. So there's that. They didn't turn on the heat in the trailers, but the propane was probably buried under snow by the time they got there. So they didn't realize that they had the equipment, or they're probably not too familiar with how that whole setup goes. There was a candle in there that someone had burned at one time. That's not going to give you any heat at all.
Right.
I mean, they have special like survival candles, but it wasn't anything like that.
Right. This is like 1978. Yeah.
Yeah. This is basic stuff, but I mean,
well, one of the things I want to hone in on too is, and you do a really good job of trying to get to the bottom of this in the book, but it's like, I don't think they want you to ever really get to the bottom of this, which is like, how did they miss this trailer? It was only about 12 miles away. This seemed like a fairly exhaustive search, and reading the book, you got to get an idea of like how intense this search was. It's like, how did you miss these trailers that were out there? And I guess I'm befuddled in a way, and I saw recently your interview with Drew, and I'm confused in a sense too about the snowcat, a snowcat, which is like a plow type thing, I guess, a wilderness plow. Cut a path to the trailer, which is what they think they followed, but we don't know really anything about like the circumstances surrounding the snowcat weirdly cutting the path to the trailer the day before they went missing.
Yeah.
That's the timing of that is very strange. We don't know who was driving the snow. Like, we don't really know who really sent out the order for someone to do it. So that's really weird. And the fact that, and again, okay, so they find the car. They didn't see the snowcat path that presumably these guys would have traveled down. So, I mean, I guess you don't really have any answers for this either, but to the best of your understanding, what went wrong here with this?
So we find out that there was a snowcat path plowed from this road up near Rogers Cow Camp to an area near like Granite Basin, Daniels Inc. Campground. And my understanding, I talked to someone who worked with the U.S. Forestry Service. So they are lost in a U.S. forest. It's not a parks. It's a U.S. forest. And the Forestry Service basically says in a situation like this, we will hand over, all power to law enforcement. You're the ones doing the search and rescue. You're the ones handling the investigation. We'll just give you guidance. According to the Forestry Service, when they find the guys, they claim, hey, we told them about this trailer, because the families are like, okay, if this is 5 miles across the land, 12 miles away along a road, you claimed you did all this searching because you borrowed a helicopter from the state. You had all these guys on these search and rescue teams doing these like very meticulous searches and things that you're doing here, like scouring the land. Yeah. How'd we miss this? And the Forestry Service, like I said, we told you it was a trailer. We showed it on a map to a guy. He's like, I'll show it to the sheriff. The Butte County Sheriff's Department and maybe the Plumas County Sheriff's Department, the Yuba County Sheriff's Department were like, no one told us about this trailer. So if we didn't know about it, we wouldn't have known to look there. And the Forestry Service is like, we told you, you're not, you're forgetting, or you got something lost in communications. So if they claim to have had a chopper going around, I mean, like where did it go? And that's another thing. Like, we do not have a map showing like, oh, we looked here, here, and here. Right. And then you have to follow it with the newspaper. So you're thinking, in some cases, they went south of the car, they went west of the car, right? And I think they went east of the car, but I don't think they ever went north of the car, because they probably thought, oh, why would they walk north? Because they're just going uphill, and they keep going up. So, it makes common sense to walk down the hill. But I talked to someone who worked for the Forestry Service and who was up there at the time, And they said, especially in the winter and you're walking around that area, you can kind of get turned around, and it's kind of like Blair Witch Project, where you just keep walking, and it's like, okay, where are we? Are we further away than what we were? And he said it's very easy to get disoriented. I've talked to people who lived up there and heard a conversation with someone. They're like, yeah, sometimes in the winter we would just put stuff on the trees, like cloth, just to mark our path, just to make sure, like, oh yeah, that's the path back. Yeah, but these guys weren't experienced outdoorsmen. I mean, they've been up there before. I mean, they've been in that area before, but they're not snowshoeing or skiing up there, or doing anything like snowmobiling or anything like that. And to find that path, and with the report of the snowcat, no one from the Forestry Service was even interviewed by law enforcement. And I tried to get information from the Forestry Service. They said they didn't have anything. Kind of just.
I would like to see, and I don't know if you have the means to do this, or the information really, but like I would like to see a map with the snowcat. Like, I'd like to know where in relation to the car this snowcat path was.
Yeah, they said. Yeah,
I'd like to be able to look at a map and go, oh, okay, so this was there, and you can see the. But again, it's like, even it couldn't have been that far for them to walk to find the path. So you would think that the search team would find the path. That's the weirdest part to me too, where it's like, it's not just there's a trail, there's a literal even road leading to where they are. So how not necessarily a road, but a path, a trail cut into the environment that should have been readily found. So that's super, super strange.
And like those 4 days they're missing, it really wasn't snowing, and had they found the trail, that this snowcat trail, it probably would have been like, oh, maybe we could follow that, because they said they found footprints of the guys too. But then as soon as they find the guys, the weather just gets bananas again, because now there's some more snow. It starts to rain some days. Here's another thing. The guys never, no one signals from the trailer. No one sets a fire. No one does anything to, signal anything. I mean, I don't think they had access to flares or anything, but still, like, they had books they could have set on fire. They had,
you use an example of the book of someone else that got lost in similar circumstances, and they were like, I'm going to burn this cabin down, and then they'll find me. Like,
there were these two guys up there. Their fraternity had a party. They get left behind up in the Plumas. They get hopelessly lost during a snowstorm. They find an old abandoned place, and they just set that thing on fire. And everyone's like, hey, that place is on fire. What's going on over there? And they find the guys. But they had been lost for maybe 3-4 days. But these guys are up there for months. Yeah.
You would think desperation would set in at some point. You'd be like, you know what? Let's just try that. Like, it's very. The theory, I guess, bounced around by a lot of people is that they were afraid to draw a check. They were hiding from something or someone. That's sort of the idea. Like, whatever this unknown compelling force was that drove them from the car, they took refuge in this trailer. And then, I'm glad you pointed this out in the book, because this has always kind of confused me, or sort of I've tried to wrap my mind around. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, they're found like a few miles from the trailer, and it's sort of always the question of, like, I think a lot of people assume that they like fell behind and never made it to the trailer, but part of me just thinks that they were the first to go out of the trailer. I think you bring that up in the book, and I was glad you did, because to me it's like that seems more likely that they perished on their way back trying to get back to civilization.
That's what I thought too, because talking to people like Drew and just figuring out like their path, like walking up to the trailer, like I don't think they would leave each other behind. I think they would get to the trailer, and I think they got there. Maybe the first person to leave could have been Gary, because he probably realized, I don't have my medication. My schizophrenia medication I need to take, and we're we're in trouble. So let me go.
Yeah.
He doesn't come back. So Madruga and Sterling could have said, all right, we can walk back to the car. Let's do that. And then we think Ted and Jackie Hewitt are left, by themselves. And when Ted Weir dies, it could have been like a moment for Jackie to like get out and leave and just see what help he could find. But, through all of this, it's 5 miles across the land, northeast of the car and on a 12-mile winding road.
Yeah.
And, some family members were told, that they were told like, those guys wouldn't have made it due to their disability walking from the car to that trailer. A lot of people were surprised they survived that walk. And when they started talking to people about Ted surviving in the trailer, they're like, are you sure he lasted as long as he did? Because even the coroner was like, wait, are you sure? How long? He did, because he was clean shaven, but when he was found, he had a beard.
Yeah.
And they said, due to the growth and due to this, and that, we expected him to be up there maybe 4 to 8 weeks.
Right.
And this really just puzzled a lot of people. Like, how'd they do this? Did they walk? Did someone get them up that way somehow? Were they marched that way? I mean,
right.
Someone with a gun may have just led them up there, and it's like all these theories. And one of the and one of the guys that was investigating the case in '78 said, "I got 1,000 theories, but I can shoot holes through all of them." And if law enforcement's this puzzled, a guy like me, armchair quarterback here, deep diving the case as best as I can, looking through newspapers and finding anything. It's like all of these missing links are just driving us crazy because we don't know why they got off the highway to begin with to get on this road to get up into the Plumas, because it's not like they just took a wrong turn off the highway. They had to drive through a town called Oroville, cross a bridge, go up, into the Plumas. And it's like, there's all these places.
Every step of the way in the story has all kinds of questions attached to it and all kinds of theories. So it's like you can have a million theories as to why they get off the highway. Okay, but then you get to where they're stranded. Now you have another 100 theories on why they abandoned the car. Okay, then we go to the cabin, and now we've got another 100 theories as to what went down with the cabin. So it's like it's the mother lode of mysteries in a way. It really is a mind-bending case.
Yeah, and you could have left the car running for 20 minutes with the heat on, turn it off, sit there for an hour or so, turn it back on.
Well, like we just said about the trailer, if the theory is, okay, that Gary left first to go, then the other two went after him, and then Jackie Hewitt was the last to try and leave, and then Ted. Okay, now reverse that logic to the car. So why wouldn't they have followed the same pattern, so give or take, at the car? But no, all 5 of them leave. So it's like, okay, this doesn't add up. This doesn't add up at all.
And there's talk of Madruga's window being rolled down on the car. And that's something that his family said, like, whoa, he would not walk away from that car with a window down or the doors unlocked. And that's what happened. So for him to walk away from his pride and joy, which is that car. And also, if we get back to the car, how it got up that road, the road was rutted. It's not a paved road. He hated driving on those kinds of roads, and the undercarriage of his car is A-OK. And I've seen those roads up there in the Plumas, and, I feel like I'm a good driver, but man, driving that through the snow, that's a careful drive up a road. Yeah. And all they had to do was just pull up to that road, pull back out, but they went up the road. Either someone directed them there or something happened. And this has been driving, families and law enforcement crazy since 1978. And we're into the 46th year of this case. So
it's crazy.
It's weird.
I know we're heading towards the out, but I got a few more little notes here.
I'm fine.
This one's going to drive me a little crazy. So
sure,
maybe you added a new mystery into the mythos of the Yuba County Five. In the part where you talk about they're in contact with psychics. The psychic meets with the family, And at
Yes.
one point, you're recounting the meeting, and you say, the psychic at one point is like, hey, can you turn the recorder off? Because there's something I want to say that I don't want recorded. Did
Right.
you ever find out what that was?
No, I didn't. That's a really good question. And I've been trying to find that, and unfortunately, the people who were,
At the meeting, are
at the
probably
meeting,
gone now,
yeah, all the parents passed away, and if it's like, why are we turning off? Like, why are we
right.
turning? Keep it on,
Yeah, like-
because
like-
I thought the meetings were being kind of taped secretly, but.
Yeah, it's like, what could she possibly have had to say that she didn't want them to? That's like, oh my God. Like,
yeah, and we see some of the notes from the psychics, and they're off on the location and what happened to them. Most of the psychics believe the guys had died elsewhere, and they just drove the car up to the Plumas to abandon it, because some of them thought they had died in Chico. Unfortunately, that's not true.
Right. It's not like the psychics were particularly spot on. Like I kept waiting in the book for you to get to one psychic that might have got something right, but it was like actually none of them seemingly were close at all. So
yeah, and I was surprised they brought in psychics so early, because it was like March 10th.
Yeah,
and so the guys had disappeared on the 24th, and that's usually seems to be your last ditch effort.
Do you think that was a product of the time and the era, like 1970s California?
I think so. And talking to one of the investigators, Jack Beecham, who was the undersheriff, he said he had gone to a convention and they had brought up psychics, because you watch a show like Mindhunter, you kind of see like the way that investigations are kind of changing and how you're profiling people and how you're developing these new techniques. So this was, you're probably right. It was probably a new thing. And they said, sometimes we're striking gold, and other times, a guy with a water witcher.
It was crazy.
I was like, well, okay, let's, we're pulling everyone out. We're getting everyone, we're throwing everything but the kitchen sink in there. But yeah, they had a water witcher, they had psychics. They're getting tons of phone calls and letters from people claiming to see them in places like Sacramento, Brownsville, which are all far south of the spot where they went missing. And it's a case of mistaken identity, or some of the stories are completely bogus. People are, there's the Debbie Lynn Reese who's getting the phone calls about the case.
Yes,
she's back in the Marysville, Yuba City area. All these things are happening while they're trying to look for the guys.
Yeah.
And it's just one thing after another. And there's all these, a lot of these are just distractions.
Right. It's like some kind of circus. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause they have to follow up on all these things and all these phone calls. There was even a student at USC down in LA who claimed to, I think I saw the guys on the bus driving around Los Angeles. Like, what are they doing in LA? Like, why would they have gone that far south? And some people think they were sucked into a commune up there.
Right. And it's like, what
the Moonies?
Like what these guys just joined a cult like overnight? Like,
I don't
out of the blue with no suspicion from their family whatsoever. It's like, that's just so weird of a theory. It's like,
and everyone was like, these guys are living comfortable. They were all living with their parents, and their lives are pretty comfortable. It's like, hey, life's good. Like, why join the cult? Why?
Right. Yeah, they're having a good time.
Yeah, and they said with the cults, like they would always make people like call home for money. So none of these guys called home for money. But yeah, it's all part of the case in the book. We, I do my best to try to go over everything, but in the end, it's still frustrating that we just don't have information on this. And the point of the book is to hopefully jumpstart someone's memory and say, hey, you were around, you remember some things. There was a lot of scuttlebutt going on. What do you remember? Because when I was doing some research, there was a few people who came forward and said, some people know things, but they don't want to say anything because they don't want to get in trouble and they don't want to look like they're, narcs or something like that. It's like, hey, come on. It's like 45 years. What are you holding on to and what are you afraid of?
Right. Exactly. Now, another interesting character in the book I want to ask you about is Robert Pennock. He's the basketball coach, because his actions throughout this saga are also very strange, because he never shows up it's funny because the guys never show up at the department store where all supposed to be to get on the bus. He doesn't show up either, and then he just goes to the game, never contacts the police, never contacts the family after these guys go missing. It's all very, again, another loose thread that feels like it didn't get pulled on enough by the authorities. I mean, you pull on it in the book and try and kind of highlight the weirdness of his actions in this story.
Yeah, because, they've got the Special Olympics basketball tournament. So the plan was to meet in Marysville at a Montgomery Ward department store, I think 8 a.m. We'll get in a van. We'll drive down to Sacramento. Well, the guys don't show up and the coach doesn't show up. So the guy that's sort of like the investigator goes to meet with the coach, and in the investigator's notes, he makes the coach seem nonchalant, a little aloof, a bit, suspect. He's late for the game. He doesn't have an explanation why he's late. He doesn't offer a good explanation, according to the sheriff's department, on why he never called the sheriff's department, say, hey, how can I help? What do you need from me? Yeah. What information can I get to you? So again, it's another situation, like another road you can go down in this case and say, like, okay, what was up with this guy and his actions? To me, I don't think he had anything to do with it. He could have overslept. He could have been out partying the night before. Or, maybe he just didn't want to talk about what he was doing or who he was hanging out with.
Right, exactly.
Who knows? Yeah. He could have been married and hanging out with someone else. I don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
And
been up to all kinds of stuff.
and whatever shenanigans he had going on, he just didn't, tell the sheriff's department. But yeah, that was strange. Like, he didn't show up.
Especially because the game, it's like, what a shitty coach. Like, the game meant the world to these guys. And you would think that he would, like, be like, okay, this is something's weird because this game was really important to these guys.
It's a big tournament.
Like, I'm concerned. I'm going to call the families or contact the police or become a participant in the search or whatever. Like that's kind of the weird. He just is like, no, I'm out. I don't want anything to do with this. It's like,
it's kind of like, it's like 6 1 half a dozen another with this guy. Like these guys are missing. What are you going to do? I mean, that's the way the report reads. I mean, you look at it, you're like, man, come on, dude. That's cold blooded. I mean, these guys are missing. Their parents are worried. You knew them. You're their coach. I mean, he basically said, Ted's a good guy. Jack Madruga's pretty quiet. Doesn't say anything about Jackie. Said Bill Sterling was probably one of the smarter people of the group, but kind of lazy as a player. And then he says, oh, Gary Mathias would have snapped any time. But again, I mean, if that's all you're offering the case, that's not a lot. And so I'm like, come on, man. Right. I mean, there could have been something else you could have shared with us, in this investigation. I mean, even the family members never said anything about the coach getting in touch with them or saying anything. And, this Gateway place where they went, I mean, there was a series of arson attacks. The executive director's murdered in a very bizarre firebombing incident. And they can't link those to their disappearance. And they're like, it's not one and the same because there was a whole bunch of arson. There's no arson here. But then again, can you rule out what was going on at Gateway? I mean, that's strange that someone wants to firebomb a place where people with disabilities are trying to, learn job skills. And then the director gets murdered. Like, this is some
I also found it very strange that the basketball coach was a victim of the fire of the.
One of his cars got set on fire.
Yeah, the weirdo, the firebug freak. Which is a fantastic name for a serial arsonist.
Yeah, and the coach, well, you never really talked to me about our director getting killed. And I'm thinking they would probably be like, that happened in another county.
Yeah.
What were we supposed to do? Like, we've got a whole other case here.
Yeah.
And, the situation happened, with the arsons and the murder, like maybe 3-4 years before. So a lot of this is, I can understand there's some bad blood here between, Gateway and the cops, but it's just another avenue to go down. It's like Joseph, it's like Joseph Shones. Like, you could keep following that guy and come up with all these theories, and you could do the same with the basketball coach. But at the end of the day, like, man, we're missing so many clues on what the heck's going on with these guys and why they went missing,
right?
And how they got up into the Plumas. And like I said, the book doesn't, wrap everything up neat, tidy in a bow, but it gives you enough information where you can be like, okay, well, maybe this happened, maybe that happened.
Yeah, I think
it's a good way to get the discussion going. That's what we really want.
Absolutely, and I think the book does a fantastic job of letting the reader sort of weigh each of these different possibilities based on the evidence. And it's like, I mean, I was already of this opinion, having done my own research into it before. Your stuff solidified sort of my take on this, where it's like, you can they were incapable of making the trip and got lost theory is like the lowest possibility. It's like, come on, that's ridiculous. And you do a good job of knocking down the other theory, the Gary Mathias is the cause of all this, snapped kind of thing. It facilitated or precipitated this event.
Right.
You really do a good job of knocking down this theory that so many people quickly go to, the uninformed, the folks who just hear the story, on Reddit or whatever. And they're like, oh, that's it. He just snapped. Mystery solved. It's like, bro, you don't even know. You don't even know. I mean,
if he was having, like, if he was going through psychosis or something like that, I mean, that's not something that just pops out like, oh, I'm just, out of nowhere. Like, it's gradual. You kind of, you see this coming, and it's either, you take care of it or you don't. With Gary, no one remembers him from the basketball game. No one was like, hey, there's this dude at the game.
Yeah.
I don't know what his deal was, but something was up with him. Nobody says that. Not one person. The lady that was working at the convenience store where they came in and bought a whole bunch of snacks, she didn't say, oh, hey, there was this one guy with him, and I don't know what his deal was, but something was going on. No,
one of my favorite parts of the book is that I think you quote Ted Weir's nephew, and he's like, if Gary Mathias tried to cause a problem, my uncle would have straightened it out real quick. Yeah, Ted Weir was like a gentle giant, and it was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, there's four other dudes. If this guy started losing his mind or whatever, it's like, and Bill Sterling had a sort of a bit of a rough streak or whatever, sort of in his past, where he would have probably, these guys wouldn't have been pushed around. It's like,
especially within their group,
they could have been pushed around is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, if someone's acting an idiot in your car, I mean, you can just pull over and say, look, you can walk home. I could put you in front of a payphone. Someone could come pick you up because I am not dealing with this anymore. See you later, alligator. I am hitting the road. And that's what could have happened with Mathias. Like, hey, bud, you're out of here. Like, see you later. Thanks for coming. And that's a possibility. But at the same time, like, when I talk to people about the case and all they hear about Gary, they're like, oh, well, the schizophrenic did it. It's like, just because he's schizophrenic doesn't mean he's like plotting the demise of the world and the deaths of people like every single day. And that's like on his mind. It's like, this guy's on medication. He's taking care of his life. I mean, his life's not going to be perfect, but it's on the right track. And that's what, because we examine like Gary's life, like, in his early 20s when he's not medicated for schizophrenia. And when he's medicated for schizophrenia, it seems like it's night and day and he's doing all right. And like you said, you could kick the guy out of the car and people would be like, well, the guys didn't like having Gary around. If they didn't like having Gary around, why they take him to a game?
Yeah.
Or agree to take him. They could have been like, nah, but they had him along and they did things together as a group. And they had been to Chico before. And you could say, well, it was dark out. Well, that doesn't matter. I mean, Madruga left Marysville when it was pretty much the sun had set. Yeah. So he was driving in the dark. He was used to it. They made a trip in the dark, to and from Sacramento the day before. They were perfectly fine. So they don't have this thing of getting lost. Gary wasn't having some huge mental meltdown.
Right.
Something happened that night where all of them ran into someone, and something happened.
Well, you raised an interesting point in the book that I had never considered, and that was that you put forward a possibility that I had never thought of, where you say they could have just gotten off the highway and used the restroom, because part of the idea is like, okay, at what point did they encounter this thing, this compelling force? And it's like, well, I find it hard to believe it was at the game. It's like, who would pursue them all the way 70 miles away up into the mountains? So it's like, you say, oh, maybe they got off for some reason off the highway, use the restroom, get snacks, whatever. Even though they already had snacks, who knows? That's kind of one of those things that probably has a really simple explanation, like someone has to use the bathroom. And then that set off the chain of events that led to this whole story.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Like, because in order to take the road to get to the Plumas, you have to exit the highway. So if you're exiting the highway, what's going to get you off the road? Do you want to stop somewhere, use the restroom? Did someone want to get something else to eat? Maybe they didn't like the junk food at the place. And you have to think about, was there a burger place open? Was there a gas station open? And if they pulled off the road, did they run into someone they knew? Or maybe just ran into a bunch of drunk people who were trying to start stuff, and then they tried to get away from the drunk, crazy people. Or I mean, you run into characters anywhere. Friday night,
they could have run into Joseph Jones, right? That was closer to where he was from.
I mean, and we've thought about that. Like, could Jones have found a way to get into Oroville and try to trick these guys and help him get his car? And did something go wrong there?
Yeah.
Did they run into someone else? And I mean,
well, to move towards the conclusion, if you will, was there anything? And I know you don't have the records of the other police departments or sheriff's departments, but in this day and age, one of the heartbreaking, troubling, maddening, again, this case, maddening is the big word for me on this one. It just drives me nuts thinking about the different elements of the case. Is there a thing that came along before, like, if this happened in 2024, let's put it this way, they would have people in that cabin who would be looking for all kinds of forensic information. Was there any sort of forensic study of the cabin when it went down? Or was just old school sheriff work where they were like, all right, here's the stuff. And to piggyback onto that, was there anything physical beyond obviously the bodies of Ted? Was there anything physical removed from the cabin that might still be in possession of the authorities today?
Today, I know that what they have left are the maps that they had in the car.
Yeah.
But after they found the trailer, they took some of the cans, like the C rations, and sent them to a state lab to get latent fingerprints off of them.
Oh, interesting.
Nothing, they said.
Huh.
So they either couldn't get prints off the tin cans. They may have taken some other items from the trailer down to the lab to get latent prints, but that's all they could get. I mean, that was the thing at the time. It was just fingerprints. What fingerprints can we find? But could they got fingerprints on the doors, on the windows? Did they do anything like that? And I think
the car, like in this day, like if they had, do we know what
tried.
The name of the car? Like again, but I know they didn't know about DNA, so it's like if they had the car now, they might have been able to like pick up some kind of stuff. I don't know.
I think that got for some reason. I want to say I think that car got scrapped at some point.
Yeah.
And when they scrapped that car, it could have been like a month or a year later, because I don't know how long they held on to that thing.
I'm sure they picked it clean anyway to look for anything.
Yeah, they tried getting prints, and I think it may have tied back to maybe Madruga and Matthias, because I don't know if the other guys had their fingerprints on file.
Yeah.
Because Madruga and Matthias are both in the military. I don't know if they had, but Matthias did have criminal history. I don't know if Madruga had to have his fingerprints for the military. So they were just left with really nothing. All they could look for was fingerprints. Yeah. And I don't know what extent of fingerprinting they did.
Yeah,
But one of the family members said people were walking through the trailer left and right after they found Ted. So in their opinion, it was like, well, this crime scene's, it is a crime scene. I mean, it is contaminated. So whatever clues they found, like all these people kind of walking through the trailer, what did that mess up and what are they missing? And did they not, did they lose a clue or something like that or something valuable? Because that was frustrating to them.
There's the thought, I think it was that there were notes written by Gary Mathias in the trailer, but it's like, we don't know. I think it was just his sister that saw them, and we don't necessarily said she gave them to someone, and then it's like, well, where are those now?
Exactly. Those are probably long gone.
And I think it was Jackie Hewitt's dad, Hewitt Sr. Found bullet casings somewhere around the car. And it's like, okay, well, what became of those? We don't know necessarily anything about that either. So two key pieces of evidence that could really add some insight. It's like, what did those notes say if Gary Mathias? Like, that might have been, I suppose if the sister found them, and they said anything revelatory, we would know. But it's like, strange.
I mean, in her memory, she saw, notes written by Gary. There's nothing in the report about it. Shell casings were never reported. I mean, that was found near the car. I mean, they did find like shotgun shells somewhere, but they thought that they were found a distance away from the car. And being a national forest, you are allowed to hunt in a national forest. So hunting was pretty common in the area. They probably just thought, well, this could be a spent cartridge from a shotgun shell, and there could have been a hunter up here at one point. We can't really determine they couldn't have, I don't think they were getting any DNA or anything off of that. Like you're saying, I think it's just old school policing. Yeah. And you're right. Things would be different today. Like that car would be, meticulously examined for like DNA, fibers, anything you could find.
Hairs.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Anything like that. But at the time they had what they had and they did what they did. And at the end of the day, we're still left with like why. And like I said, anything like people can come up with, like any theories they can help out with or any information that they can add to what we've already built as far as, Yuba County 5 research. We appreciate any help, any thoughts, any leads. Maybe there's something we've never thought about and someone comes out and says, hey, what about blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I think that's a good thing with this book is get the word out about the case, get to know who the 5 were, their families, what they went through, what the case was like, what the investigation was like, what clues we have, what information we have, and then just go from there. Because, if you want to, the more people we have in on this sort of hive mind, I guess you will. Yeah. Any bit of information, because I know some people have sent me information after the case or asked me questions after the case. And I'm like, these are all good questions and they're not in the case files. And it's every bit as frustrating to you as it is to me, as it is to the families. So I'm just happy the book's out and people have a chance to get it. Like I said, at Amazon or Genius Publishing or Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to look for it, it's out there and it's available.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, the last question is sort of like what's next for you, but I joked with another guest recently. They just put out a book. Like, you're just talking about the book. You probably haven't given much thought to what you might want to do next. But sort of what, I guess, raising awareness really about the Yuba County 5 case is kind of what you're doing next now.
That's the thing, right?
Right. About the case.
Yeah, right now it's promoting the book and talking about the case and getting the word out to people who are familiar with the case but not familiar with the book, and just getting it out there. And I am working on another case right now. It's in the early stages and can't say much about it, but working with someone who has ties to the case. And so it's once we can get the ball rolling more and get some more information and keep it going, I think we'll be able to say more about that. But right now, I kind of want to keep privacy for a certain individual and the case that we're tied to with that. But there is something else coming eventually. Who knows how long it'll take? Like this book took 4 years. Hopefully, this next project takes much less because I know more about what to do, and I'm not going to get knocked down by the craziness of the world. Yeah, pandemic and everything. Good grief, man! I tell you what. But it's great that it's out there. So
absolutely, yeah. And maybe perhaps one positive byproduct from the book is that maybe this will put the pressure on the other departments to release their files.
If they've got anything to share something.
I feel like, and I do you feel, as I send you off into the night, Tony,
yes.
Do you feel that this case can be solved at this point? Do you feel like we could possibly ever, because I feel like there's still one more twist coming. I feel like there's still, like, Gary Mathias is going to turn up somewhere, or someone like a deathbed confession from someone who's going to be like, but I feel like there's still one more twist to come in this case, because it just something in my bones just kind of is like, I feel like I'm going to wake up one day and go, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like,
I'm thinking it's the death. Bro. I'm thinking it's the deathbed confession. I think it's the last minute. I truly believe someone knows something and they're not sharing it, and for whatever reason. I mean, all I want to say is, like, what the family's been through for 46 years, and whatever you're worried about, I think what you're worried about is far less than what the families are going through. And if their parents couldn't have had any kind of closure, at least give it to the siblings, nieces and nephews and other family members, because that means probably everything to them, and to have that information. And to me, like, it's just been the one thing that I've felt since the beginning. Somebody's got, like, that information.
Yeah.
They've got the deathbed confession type thing. And you know what? It's, we're close to 50. We're getting closer to 50 years from this case. And as the case goes on, it's like, how long do you need to hold on to this information? Because I feel like someone's holding back. Someone knows something, and the truth is going to get out there. I'm hoping it's soon, and this book helps push that. Mm-hmm. And once we get it, I think we're going to be in a very good place. Like, knowing what happened is like the ultimate goal of this book.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a hope too. I said this to Drew last night. I have a serious hope that, as you said, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary. I hope that the momentum that's been built up since 2018, Drew's book, the Mopac podcast, your outstanding book. I think as we get to the 50th anniversary, I think it's going to have this renaissance is going to fully bloom into a national remembrance story that people are going to say, and you're going to see it more. Like, how has there not been a Netflix special yet? How has there not been a streamer hasn't picked up on this story yet? I think it will happen in the next few years with the 50th anniversary coming up. And if this catches even more fire, I think that maybe it'll jostle something loose. That's the hope.
I hope so too. And, we've got programs like this where you're very interested in the case, and you've talked to Drew, you've talked to me. There's many other people like you out there who are saying, I want to know more about this case. It's a huge tragedy. It's a big mystery. Let's get it going. Let's talk about it. And well, I agree with you 100%. I think by the 50th anniversary, let's get the answer. I mean, it would be nice to get the answer out there. I'm hoping that something comes of this in a positive way, where we know what happened February 24th, 1978. Whatever's been buried all this time is finally unearthed, and we've got the key information that we've been desperately waiting for.
Absolutely. So with all that said, I have dragged another 25 minutes out of you, Tony. I really do appreciate it.
It's all good.
We could talk all night, but I'll be merciful and let you get going. The book is Things Aren't Right, The Disappearance of the Yuba County Five. Tony Wright is, of course, the author. Folks, you know how much I am enchanted by this case. I am spellbound by how strange it is. So many Binnall of America listeners are as well. So go and pick this up. As I said at the very start of the show, this is the book. This is the one you've been waiting for. I cannot praise you enough, Tony, for the work you put into this.
Thank you, Tim.
Really personalized it in a way that not only with the families, but with yourself, that it was a journey that I felt like I was going on with you. And that was an awesome technique that you used that I really liked a lot. And so, yeah, that's it. I could sing your praises all night, but as I said, I'll let you get going into the night. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And
thank you.
I'm already thinking I need to drag you and Drew on for a special sometime, like in
anytime,
a few months, where we talk about this again, because we're gonna stay on the Yuba case here on Binnall of America, because I want to see it. I want to see it solved. I want to see where it goes.
And the night with Drew would be great. And if you have people with questions, they want to email them to you and email them in, we'll answer them to the best of our abilities. And that's an awesome idea. I'm feeling that 100%.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
You too. See you later. Thank you for everything. Take care.